worried should we be about cholera outbreak?
Yeah, ordinarily, if there is a good hygiene and things are put in place, like some industrialized nations, we should not be worried. However, it's not like that. So cholera should be given all attention because in the event that it gets out of hand, it can also kill within days. So it's something that deserves public attention.
Okay,
Yes.
because according to NCDC, we have over 200 deaths, we're bordering on 300 now. So I wonder about this particular disease, cholera. Should we be concerned about it as we were during COVID when there was threat of Ebola virus in Nigeria? Are they like of the same family, or is this something different entirely?
Yeah, not exactly like COVID.
Okay.
However, COVID has introduced hygiene consciousness, which, if upheld, will also cover for things like cholera. Cholera is purely waterborne, and I think it's in the forefront because of flooding. So, once water is contaminated, food is contaminated, fruit is contaminated, um, one can easily get cholera and even continue to pass it on even close to 14 days. So, although it's not the same, COVID, you're talking about virus and the rest, but cholera, you're talking about bacteria, and the way they affect the system clearly differs, but they it deserves attention.
Okay, all right, sir. So now let us talk about how communicable it could be. You know, for COVID, it's like you have to use your face mask. There are some steps you could take to make sure that you do not contact cholera? Or is the person who is treating an affected person, how susceptible are they to also contacting cholera?
Um, yes, it's not like COVID where you wear face mask, you don't want to inhale. Cholera, like I said, it has to do with contact, it has to do with water that is contaminated. So the major issue is hygiene. If the sewage, there's proper sewage disposal, and people don't defecate in open spaces, and drinking water is not contaminated, hand washing is adhered to, people drink safe, clean water. It can be boiled water, it can be treated with chlorine. The chain of cholera will be cut off.
Okay.
Yes. So it's something that simple, basic things we do can actually help to prevent.
Okay, all right. So, what are the diagnoses? What are the things we need to look out for so that we may know if this person beside us is having cholera, or if there's need to rush them to the hospital, if it is something they could still calm down a bit on?
All right. Cholera, sometimes some people may have cholera and initially they may even be asymptomatic. But however, majority, you will notice that one of the few first things you notice that they can start vomiting for some hours. Someone is vomiting. They start passing watery stool, what we describe as rice water stool. You know, when you wash rice, you see how the water looks a bit milk. So typically described. So those are things that one can see. This person has been passing stool frequently. The stool looks milk colored, you know, like rice water stool. You know, those are some of the things that one can see, and it's usually of sudden onset. You notice that you suspect that there are other diseases that can be like that, but there will be that suspicion that this could be cholera, and attention should be given.
Is cholera the only thing we have to be worried about? Because, of course, with water, there are also many waterborne diseases, but the one that attention is on right now, the one that spotlight is on, is cholera. Well, is it only cholera we have to watch out for?
No. Yes, like you rightly said, there are other waterborne diseases. I think that the reason for attention on cholera is because of the rate of spread and the time frame within which it can bring someone down. For instance, a typical cholera case, someone can pass up to 1 liter of fluid, you can say, per hour. So, because of the fact that if you don't know what to do or you don't act quickly, you can lose a patient with cholera. That's why you see it's being given. There are other waterborne diseases, even typhoid that people commonly talk about. It's also something that can be a problem with flooding. Um, Things like when you get dysentery caused by entamoeba. It's also, people stooling blood and all that. Bacillary dysentery, what they call shigellosis. So all that, even some of these common worms, those are things that can come because generally what the flood does is that it will carry the contaminated water and then spread to the other body of waters that people consume, like even the well water is a great reservoir for some of those waterborne diseases. So, so besides cholera, you have dysentery. You even have what we call E. coli bacteria, other bacteria that are in the water that can, on even food that can be contaminated. So there are a whole lot of other waterborne diseases. So, but the good thing is that if the same preventive measure for cholera will help eliminate and cut the chain for similar diseases.
So you mentioned well water because I think the image that comes to mind when people talk about water pollution is perhaps people would drink from river. But now that you mentioned well water, is borehole spared or is this also part of water sources that could be contaminated?
Yes, exactly. It is because, in fact, the standard rule they have the meters within which borehole can be sited, either from the sewage or the rest of them. Even where people defecate should be at least 30 meters away from water body. So borehole is also included in the mix. If there is flooding, if everything is overrun and by water. So if the water is contaminated, it's going to spread, and whatever source people get their water from to drink will become affected, and people are exposed to the risk.
Okay, all right. And that earlier when you were talking about some of the things to look out for so that one would know if the person around one or one is infected with cholera, could you please give us some first aid tips like some DIY, do it yourself stuff
Yeah.
that you could just do at home to sustain you before you get to the hospital? Because if we are to look at the Nigerian response system when it comes to emergency, I don't want to use the word terrible, but could you give us some DIY tips that everyone could do?
Yeah. Besides prevention, which is key for things like cholera, in the event that one is suspected to have cholera, the danger is the dehydration. That is the loss of fluid and water. Not necessarily the cholera bacteria itself, but it releases toxins in the intestine, in the gut, that will now cause all the other cascade of events that happen. So the basic thing is to rehydrate. If the person can still drink, the person as much fluid as possible. Thankfully, you will see the oral, what they commonly call ORS sachets are everywhere. Cut one, put in 1 liter of water, and people drink if they can drink. So those are the things that can be done initially, because the most important thing is to rehydrate. It's the lack of fluid that will now lead to shock, that will lead to loss of electrolytes, because electrolyte imbalance, and now start affecting the organs, the kidney, and the person packs up. So the key, one thing that must be done is to rehydrate the patient, whichever way, either through the ORS, either through coconut water, like they say. There is also common mixture of salt and water that usually put out people at home. So that's the first thing they should do before heading to hospital. Once you rehydrate adequately, the chances of saving the person is high.
Thank you. All right, thank you for that, sir. And lastly, on this topic, before we move to the next topic, is what advice would you give the Federal Republic of Nigeria, the federal government, on ways to manage this outbreak so it does not turn to colossal loss of lives?
Yeah, it's just that general taking life of people serious in this part of the world. I'm not sure the government gives adequate attention to people. We're always reactive, wait until things that we are getting used to people just dying as if it's normal news. So prevention is key. Prevention can also be in form of enlightening and educating the public about cholera outbreak. Market women may not even be watching us. People in the streets and all that. Those campaigns help. Cholera should and all that should come in form. Now that people know there is flooding everywhere, there should be that ABC of cholera. Something as simple as if you wash hand with soap and water, don't wait until when they now say 10,000 or so have died in a state, will now come and begin to look for donor funds, and people just make money out of people's life. But simple things, simple hand wash, do not drink contaminated water. If you can afford, you drink bottled water. If you cannot afford, you boil water and drink. There's even some simple things, chlorinated substances they use to treat water. They can go back to such things and tell people drop so and so tablet into the water. It's going to disinfect the water. Sometimes they even look chlorine manufacturer. They say drop 2 drops into a liter of water. The water is safe for drinking. So educating the public will go a long way. It's inexpensive compared to treating and all that. So that way, the government would have done a lot to then besides the bigger things, which is now ensuring the hospitals are equipped, the manpower is there, well motivated, because sometimes it comes like an outbreak, and you are handling this one. If you go to a typical emergency unit where people have cholera, you will see that it's not something you want to happen, because you are trying to attend to this, they rush another one. Usually like an outbreak in a community, and if you must be able to attend to everyone almost the same time. So that's another aspect that government can do something to be able to ensure. But preparedness is key. Then there is also vaccine for cholera. Also, vaccine for cholera, although limited, but it's also a way, especially in this. But now that cholera has also come to forefront again, so the vaccination will also be people from children from 2 years and above to adults, and this oral vaccine they drop in the mouth. They drop it within 1 to 6 weeks. They give a second dose, and that will also help to prevent cholera.
Okay,
And
yes.
tackle it.
Because when you mention shortage, the World Health Organization is also having trouble getting vaccines to everywhere, because there's outbreak of cholera in some parts of Africa and they have limited amount. So do you not feel this is a wake-up call to Nigeria to start developing these vaccines themselves?
Yes, of course. That is, we are highly, we are equipped in terms of knowledge, but the infrastructure and all that is needed to be able to develop that has always hampered the progress. Some of these things can be initiated and developed, and we can have them in good number to take care of our populace. So it's good to think in that direction. I think efforts are also in that direction.
Okay.